Welcome in, everybody, to Destination Unknown, episode 21. I am now in San Francisco, California, with Ted Joya from Arion Press and Grabhorn Institute. Welcome in, Ted. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I had about 3 or 4 episodes back to back to back where they wouldn't let me out of Colorado. Taylor
Uh,
Kirkpatrick from episode 20 finally got me out of Colorado. So now I'm with you, which is a great joy and a great opportunity for our audience to see what you guys are doing over there. So if you don't mind sort of just summarizing what the Grabhorn Institute and Arion Press is all about, and then we'll
sure.
sort of deep dive into that.
Sure. Well, my name's Ted Joy. I'm the Program and Development Director at Arion Press and the Grabhorn Institute. The Arion Press was founded in 1974 by Andrew Hoyam as a sort of one of the leading letterpress printers in the United States, and we've done many, unique and kind of acclaimed books. But our kind of formula, even though we don't have a house style in the same way as other presses, is inviting well-known artists to help us kind of reimagine works of classic literature. So it is somewhere between a fine press book and a artist book. So we really made our name by with an edition of Moby Dick with woodcuts by Barry Moser, and we've been publishing books ever since. And right now, we've done everything from Robert Motherwell's Ulysses, Kara Walker's Porgy and Bess, and right now we're releasing this year. We have 2 books coming out. We have Octavia Butler's Kindred with artwork by Alison Sarr, and then a kind of very wonderful deluxe imagined version of Aesop's Fables, or the Fables of Aesop, as we're presenting it, where we've asked 15 of our past artists to each illustrate one fable, and we've invited Kiki Smith to do the box, and Daniel Handler, also known as Lemony Snicket, to rewrite the morals. And the Grabhorn Institute is the nonprofit that supports our work. And so we are the continuation. We're the successor press of the Grabhorn Press, which was founded in the late teens by Robert and Edwin Grabhorn, who are the brothers that really founded the fine press boom in the West Coast. They moved to San Francisco and launched a lot of and are really the godfathers of the sort of letterpress scene out here. And so they also did a wonderful, famous edition of Leaves of Grass and did many, many eclectic and wonderful books. And Andrew Hoyam apprenticed under them. And then we've inherited their equipment and machinery, because often letterpress printers, the same way how you pass down maybe a cast iron pot or some sort of pieces of cooking equipment to your family, printers often pass down their presses and their type and all that to the next generation. So we are using presses and equipment that is often over 100 years old and has a very storied lineage. But what distinguishes our work outside of just making beautiful books is that we're the only printer in the United States that makes books entirely by hand from comma to cover under one roof. So we have 3 departments. There's a hot metal type foundry, which is a separate business called M&H Type that we absorbed or we acquired in the late 80s. And that is still sells type to some printer enthusiasts, but really, and that business was founded in 1915. When they displayed their machines in the Hall of Machinery at the Panama Pacific International Exposition. Then we have a press room, and then we have a full-time hand bookbindery. So essentially what that means is that every book is that we have the type, and every piece of spacing or punctuation or letter is a piece of type that we make on site, and they're printed in the next department in the press room, and then they go to the bindery, and then we bind our books. And our books are made in editions of 250 copies for sale. So it is like throughout the whole year, we might make, if in a good year, this year, we're only going to make 500 books altogether. So it's very labor intensive, but we are keeping that art form of handbook making alive. So that's the sort of greater mission and vision.
Yeah, you're joining the art world, the literary world, and making a new hybrid of that with contemporary artists and oftentimes classical writers.
Yes, that is exactly the kind of the business model where we speak to the fine press and the bibliophile book collector community and the art collecting community, which are very different psychographic profiles. They collect in different ways, and they're driven often by different ways in which they share, create meaning, and sort of display their work. I mean, art collectors are sort of are opportunists. You can't have all of Rembrandt; it's not available. And once you buy artwork, you put it on the walls in the museums, and everybody sees it. But
Right.
if you're a book collector, it is about, you can be a completionist, and you can be, oh, I am collecting maritime fiction. And if
Right.
you expand your focus too much, then it's unattainable. But because books, of course, are printed with many, many copies, there are things that are attainable. You can have all of something. And often it is much more difficult to display what makes that magical book to the public. Some things, sure, if you have, the first folio, that's one thing. But, if you're collecting a very, a more rarefied topic, it is hard to sometimes even people that are
Right.
spouses or their children can't really explain what makes it special. So it's an interior process. And so that's such a different, psychology that goes into these different, both are forms of creating meaning, but they're different.
And because they're limited editions, I mean, there's an ungodly amount of craftsmanship that I know go goes into what you
Yeah.
guys are creating over there. When I interviewed Taylor Kirkpatrick last week, he was talking about the Steinbeck Sea of Cortez book.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about one, how you join a literary classic with an artist, and then how does Arion Press decide what to do going forward?
Oh, that's a great question. Books start in a number of ways. I would say that it is more of a magic than a science, really, when coming up with the selections. We sell books now in, one of the first things I did when I joined the press is I convinced the team to move into an annual subscription model. So previously it was book by book where we couldn't tell you what you would get and we couldn't tell you what it would cost. So
Mystery book.
it's tough. So it could be $400 this
Sure.
time, and the next month it's 4,000.
Right.
And so now we basically view it as a season. So we do 2 or 3 books a year, and you kind of balance them across the different needs. So you say, oh, these are things that are going to appeal to book collectors. These are going
Mhm.
to be for the art collectors, and then you have a variety of of genre, a variety of different perspectives or diverse kind of points of view and kind of mediums. And so what we look for when books is either it starts with a book or an artist. So either there's a book that we want to do because we have a specific tie to it or a specific kind
Mhm.
of lead. So one good example of that is you probably heard about the Sea of Cortez from Taylor Kirkpatrick, but to
Mhm.
sort of recap, that is, we got this opportunity where John Steinbeck wrote this wonderful marine travelogue called The Sea of Cortez about traveling around the Sea of Cortez of his best friend, the marine biologist Ed Ricketts. And he and it was about his travels on the specific ship called the Western Flyer. And we
Right.
were actually able to get the ship, the actual historical boat, the Western Flyer, and get some wood from it. So we constructed a box from that wood, and for one of the deluxe editions, and also had incorporated that as like a kind of a placard or a
Right.
title card on the book. And so that was something where this opportunity for this title led us to find the specific artist who brought that to life. Or another example was our Poe's Fantasia, where we had an opportunity to receive bricks from Edgar Allan Poe's actual historic house in Brooklyn the house was wrecked and I
Mhm.
think NYU was expanding or something. Uh, and then we had these bricks, like, what can you do with that? And then we worked with this incredible paper maker and sort of sculptor named John Sullivan, and we constructed these sort of paper plates, and then cameo portraits of Poe that we affixed to the actual book. And that was this idea and the book itself was a compilation, an anthology of his selected writings. And then we asked a wonderful artist named Natalie Frank, who's known for sort of her feminist reinterpretations of text. She did a well-known Grimm's fairy tale, and there have been so few interpretations of Poe by women. And it turns out there's almost no depictions of Lenore actually by well-known artists. And so we invited her to kind of redo that and create these sort of wonderful gouache drawings. And it was this sort of idea of what I would call sort of an innovative traditionalism, where, we're working with forms of bookmaking that are hundreds of years old, sometimes. I mean, bookbinding, it really hasn't changed since the
Right.
medieval ages. It's, they got it right. And so you have this sort of ancient crafts, but then you're also applying, you want to innovate and offer something new and modern, but you don't want to lose the essence of it. And we're not really looking for like, political reactionary interpretations of the books. We're looking for something that refreshes that which
Mhm.
is new and eternal of them. And so
Right.
that's kind of how we approach these books.
I mean, I can just imagine being a Steinbeck collector and you think you got all the works, you think you got a few letters in your collection, and something
Yeah.
like this comes out with a clamshell case made from the boat he was working on during the travels of this book. I mean, it's a reinterpretation
Yeah.
of collecting. I mean, you're getting minus the author's signature, minus Steinbeck's
Yeah.
signature, you're getting a part of Steinbeck's life
Yeah.
as he was writing and going through the journey of this book.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions one must ask is, what is a rare book today? Like what books that are
Sure.
being made today, not books that were made, in the past, but like, in November 2024, what books that will be the rare books of the future?
Right. Of
And,
the future.
there may
Yeah.
be things where it is a famous writer in a first edition. Sure, we know that. But as a press and others, is that you want to think about what are the things that are truly unique and that people will
Mhm.
truly want to keep for 100 years or hundreds of years in their family. And so that's one of the goals of is that these historic additions, whether the historic objects where you're taking an artifact and incorporating it as a material are very obvious, and the others are something where it is like the platonic ideal of the book. And so
Right.
it is something you either have a famous artist or just such a beautiful rendering of it that everybody wants it. And so that's one of the big questions. I would be curious to hear your thoughts about other things you've seen that make a book, a rare collectible book today, but it's a question we're always asking.
Yeah, I think from my end of it as a bookseller and someone who understands the collector's market, I think what gets collected that's published now seem to have a cinema tie. There has to be some sort of cinema tie. Sometimes it's a book that is published in very limited run, and then there's movie rights. I mean, Harry Potter would be the most perfect example of that. I mean, probably 5,000 first editions in the British edition, 2,500 going to libraries. Nobody, this book was out there, and then it got a little word of mouth, and movie rights were sold, and then they put a lot
So
of
when a
money
movie's
behind it.
sold, then all of a sudden it becomes so. But like so, when Dune comes out, does that mean that the original first edition is
Yeah.
successful, or that some new edition they're making this year is going to be?
Well, I mean, if you guys did Dune, it would be extremely popular,
Yeah.
of course. But when Dune came out recently, in the film in the cinema again, all of the Dune collectors came out, and the market sort of got a little saturated with
Uh,
Dune. But everybody
okay.
always wants the first edition, first printing, Frank Herbert Dune
Yeah.
copy, which was a small press. It wasn't the one that everybody knows about. It was a very small press. So the
Hmm.
cinema is always good when a movie comes out that's based on a book.
Yeah.
Reinvent a movie that comes out that's a remake of a movie. The book sales always go up. People always go back into looking at what that market is.
That makes sense. I
Yeah,
mean, I would imagine that. Yeah. This sort of it's a um uh looking backwards sort of
right.
reification of something as a collector's category. Maybe that happened with Uh, I'm forgetting the guy's name right now. It'll come to me in a second. Like Percival Everett. Um,
Sure.
where all of a sudden that movie adaptation of American Fiction now is
Mhm.
a hot, a hot writer, and a lot of people are revisiting. I think the part that's sort of dispiriting to me about that is the notion of how little control then that press or bookmakers have in creating their own value, and
Yeah,
you're very dependent upon these larger forces, and especially Hollywood, to like it. So I mean, that's the question: is it like,
right,
yeah, how can you create interest and value?
right.
And for us, it's obviously scarcity and telling a story about craft.
Well, yeah. Also, I think something we have to look at is how much the publishing world has changed since the
Yeah.
second half of the 20th century. I mean, how many presses are around, like New Directions and Grove? I mean, all of these smaller counterculture presses that were around the second half of the 20th century. They've all fallen by the wayside. They've been all of the publishers are now large houses, and sometimes the collector's market on my end, you root for those small presses that are trying to publish new and innovative voices, but their staying power isn't that long anymore. But because those books have a small print run, there is still the ability or the opportunity for those small presses to have a high collectability in the future too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is very interesting. So, are there things I used to work at McSweeney's for a couple years? Are there McSweeney's books that are collectibles?
I mean, if I had the first 10 issues of McSweeney's 1 through 10, I'm sure there would be a nice price tag on that.
Yeah, a couple of the best issues, the most famous ones,
Yeah,
I do know people really go after.
right.
Um, but that's the interesting question about it is, yeah, is
Yeah, I love this conversation because I remember when McSweeney's came out and David Edgars was building his name.
mhm.
And those would you call them books or magazines? I mean, they were beautiful in themselves.
Yeah, yeah, they're a magazine, but but they were always imagined as having the sort of quality and the sort of permanence of a book.
Right.
And it's a beautiful concept of a redesigned. Um, excuse me, sorry,
Yeah.
my phone is somehow linked to this. Excuse me, that's actually a book person. Um, but
Let's
um,
sell a book while we're on the call.
uh, uh, that redesigning every issue so you really do want to keep it having it
Right.
that sort of freshness and having different types of writers and voices. And one of the things that's nice about that is you then have an ability to with a subscription model to take chances. And it's not that any issue is like bad but there are some that are going to be home runs. You're going to go for some and they're like, oh,
Right.
that was okay, that was pretty good, but then there's some that was like there might be giants one, then there's the one in the head, there's the
Right.
uh the a couple of the others, the balloons one. There's a few that are
Right.
just true home runs, and it gives you that sort of sense that you really need to stay with it
Right.
because when they hit that home run, you want to have a copy.
Yeah. And also with McSweeney's, I mean, McSweeney's was a literary journal, but they were not like your everyday universal literary journal, 84 pages. And, you know, I mean,
I think
you
you need
guys were doing
design
some,
or
yeah, you guys were doing something special.
Yeah, I think this is. I've often wondered if Dave ever took any inspiration from Arion because it's similar in the sense that every book is totally
Yeah.
redesigned and is like a totally different concept and very different voice and style. But essentially the thing that makes it valuable, or I think right now, especially in the internet age, you design and the physical properties of a book are more important than ever
Mhm.
because it's so easy to just get the text out of a book or a publication just out immediately on so many platforms. But there's something about if you have a beautifully designed presentation in which that is part of it, interacting with the object is part of it, that is just extra important in the internet age. And especially the iPhone, after I got an iPhone, I read books. Physical books, I read fewer physical books, but
Right.
when I do, I have a deeper connection to them, and I really value them as objects. So I think that is the you're seeing this shift towards the analog. Or, I mean, it's funny how culture develops. It can develop in a way that's both digital and analog at the same time. And because you have a first for both as uh, a reader.
Right. But it's interesting because the generations are growing up now with a cell phone. they're now, from what I see, they want to hold the book in their hand.
Yeah.
They want that tactile feeling of what it's like, of what you and I grew up on, with holding a book and flipping its pages and putting a bookmark in it. The generations now, they're not getting that same feeling, but there is that nostalgia, even though they've never had it, to see what it looks like. I mean, when I used to teach high school, and when I would show them what a typewriter was, their brain would blow up. They they
Yeah.
they couldn't believe somebody would write a book or a letter on a typewriter.
Well, one of the funny things is that more and more young people are interested in the book arts and
Oh yeah,
analog. We also run the only paid hand bookmaking apprenticeships in the country. So that's for bookbinding, printing, and typecasting. And so, we have 40 applicants for the bindery. And there's a lot of people who are interested in it. And I think it is this desire for that they want that enrichment of that even if they're not sure what it is that they're missing, there is that desire for interacting and understanding how things are made, if so much of your life is flattened on a screen.
right.
One of the ways that we approach this, and I'm just going to go on a little monologue about the way that
Be
our
my
current
be
book
my
is.
guest. Be my
So,
guest.
our current book is called Fables of Aesop, and it's our 50th anniversary publication. Typically, I'd say a book takes 9 months to make, and it's about 5,000 hours of labor, but this has
Mhm.
been about 2 years and, closer to 10,000 hours. And what you'll see is that at every stage, you want it to have that magic of the object. So we've been working with this artist named Kiki Smith to design the box. And so the box has, 12 parts, and about 37 artisans have contributed to the making of the book. So she had this fable, The Belling of the Cat, where she then did a hand drawing of a cat that we uh, stamped in foil and silver across the cover, and then she made a white bronze cast mini sculpture of a mouse that she embedded into the cover. And so then you open that cover and it's a box. So you open it and then it's an unbound series of folios. So each one is something you pick up and you open. And for the paper, we print it. We got the paper from the famous Arches mill in France. And this is the mill that's over 500 years old. It gave the paper for the Nuremberg Chronicle in 1498. They gave the paper for Napoleon in 1800. Ingres, the painter, famously didn't like any paper to paint on which to paint their work. So he worked with this mill for many years to create the perfect canvas for paintings, and that you can still buy that today. And so that is the paper. And the idea is that you want every to be a story about the people who make every aspect of a book, because so much of life is, or so many you in a consumer society, you just receive things, you toss them out, and there's this sense that like I can tell you that like Megan, Gibbous made that comma or made that stitch. And
Mhm.
there's that power of having that name. And so then asking 15 artists to each write or each create a single type of illustration for pick a fable and illustrate it. And so some were traditional prints, like Audrey Niffenegger, who's a book artist and the author of The Time Traveler's Wife. She did the Pitcher and the Crow, and then there's other artists, an artist named Michelle Okadonor, who's a sculptor, who did The Fox and the Grape, and she made this little assemblage of like found grass and coconut husk, and it was like, how are you going to turn this into a print? And then we figured out how to do it. It took very complicated, very long time to do. Um, and the idea is that it's a book that you will really want to experience in person. You want to flip through it, savor the texture of the paper, enjoy and relish each artwork. And it's something that you want to read to your children, and you want to read to your family, and you want to pass down to your family. And there's this idea of creating books as a sort of like almost a relic or a holy object, which is a way that is a market opportunity, I think, in the internet book economy.
Also, though, it's a book you want to show off. The same way
That's
you would
true.
want to show off a car, you want to show off the Steinbeck Sea
Oh,
Cortez
no, no,
or the
that
Patti
that
Smith.
is the other,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, less, very true, but less noble values that, yeah, books as a
as
luxury
art. Yeah,
commodity, and it is something for a coffee table book, and I've heard that from so many people. Where do you? I show it in my living room. I keep it here and I show it to everybody. And there's a beauty in that, is that like it's a book that whose beauty you're meant to share. And Elaine Scarry has a fear the famous literary critic and aesthetic theorist from Harvard. She has this theory that one of the values of beauty is that you want to share it with someone else. That's one of the definitions of beauty. And that is a beautiful thing when you feel that need that you don't want it to just sit there empty as a book, but you want to share with other people. And so that is another option, is like, I mean, and the influx of money into the art market for that level of sort of showing off and sort of conspicuous consumption has, lifted the art market in incredible ways. And, it would be, interesting if that happened for books again, because back in the day, book collector acquisitions were making, newspaper headlines, but now, it's very rare.
From my feeling and my gauge in selling books right now, we're in the beginning of another book gold rush. I think people are coming
Interesting.
back to literature, and nonfiction as well, but they're coming back to the classics. And I think society, as you said, with the two-dimensional tablet of the phone, they're going back to wanting to hold something, see something, feel something. And I think
And,
we're at the very beginning of it.
and what types of books are benefiting from this gold rush? Or what types of books are people interested in?
Well, I mean, I sell about 50 books a day worldwide. And right now I'm selling, funny enough, I'm selling a lot of art books, a lot of exhibition catalogs, a lot of artist monographs. But, as a used bookseller, I'm victim to what I newly acquired and what I newly list, because
Yeah.
that's always the most exciting thing. So I did acquire a vast art book collection, and so I've been selling a lot of art books. Um, but everything
Are there
from
any artists in particular that are selling better, or
Ellsworth Kelly sells very well. Helen Frankenthaler very well. I sold a Man Ray today.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I can give you an extensive list. I mean, I last week someone bought about 8 books on German expressionist art. So it was the movement, it was the entire movement. They bought several books from there.
Huh.
But that being said, if I had bought a very large Native American literature book collection and was
Yeah.
selling it, then the question that you asked would have a different answer. But
And
because
and
I'm
why
listing
did
so
you?
many,
What was the what was your intuition or business logic behind going for this artist book collection?
oh, somebody called me from the state of Arkansas. They saw a YouTube video of mine. They were needed to sell the house. The estate company called me. They needed to sell the house,
Hmm.
and they had this collection of art books that this gentleman had collected for 30, 40, 50 years. And it ended up being, this is going to shock you now,
Yeah.
14 pallets,
Oh, wow.
14 boxes, 14 pallets, all of art, design, and furniture books.
Hmm.
Um, so I bought the entire collection and have been selling it since the day I started getting them listed on eBay. Um, so things like that pop up all the time.
Sure.
But it's not even about, I mean, I'm probably been selling at least one Jackson Pollock book or exhibition catalog once a week for the past 10 weeks. I mean, all the same artists that Robert Motherwell, they still sell in the used book market as well. Um,
Yeah.
it's very interesting to me because what you guys are doing, you're joining the art world and the literary world. So would you say that because you have a subscription base, is it more of the literary people buying the books from you in limited edition, or is it more of the art world, do you think?
It's split. We've moved more towards the art world because there's more money there. And we're funded a lot more through donations. So it's
Okay.
much more about selling the vision. For me, I don't describe myself as a bookseller. I
Right.
like talking about books that I find interesting to people.
Hmm.
It's about talking about vision and creating a shared meaning about why books matter. And one of the reasons is that when you talk to book You'll have collectors, who have a very specific focus, and they will want to, okay, there's a well-known collector I know who focuses on maritime fiction.
Okay.
So, and is a great collector in that area. But anything outside of that, he's not going to be interested in. And so
Right.
something like the Sea of Cortez, that's technically nonfiction. She's like, nope, out. And so it's one of those things you'll get someone who buys book one, and it's often a lot of work.
Hmm.
Customer acquisition is one of the hardest things, right? You've got to, especially if you have unusual books that you're trying to sell, is if you go there, you find the right person, you present the book in the right way, you share it there, then they buy the book, and it's all that effort. And then they're like, well, I'm not interested in that. You just tell me when you do the next John Steinbeck book.
Right. Right.
That doesn't work as a sustainable business model. And I think especially that like one of the things that you see is that, I don't for booksellers, it's very tough to compete when you have to find these many individual collectors on every book, and that puts a lot of pressure on that every book has to sell pretty well. You can't take chances, as opposed to basically selling the vision. So you're basically selling that this is something you're essentially donating to support this cause
Right.
by signing up as a subscriber, and you get two fantastic, beautiful books. And so that's so it's much more about saying it's like the old limited editions club,
Right.
trust our judgment. And then you see that, we split into two tiers. So there's a deluxe edition, which is $10,000 a year for two to three books. And then we only make 40 of those, and that is sold
Right.
out. And then we have our fine press edition, which is this year it's $2,400 for two books. And there still are some spots available, but it's the more rarefied one that sells out more quickly.
Right.
And so that's one of the funny things about our work is that if we produced fewer books, we would sell out much more quickly. And we're in this odd thing. It's odd to say that you sell $1,000 books, but they're quote, trying to be democratic. But there's this idea that we're in between the book and the art market because, $2,400, huge amount for a book, not much for a painting,
Right.
nothing for a painting. If you're buying paintings for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million, nothing. And
Right.
so it's a very odd, and so you find the ways to have those two markets come support each other. So I think that our subscriber base is about 40%, um, uh, 45% book people, 35% um, art collectors, 10% libraries and 10% designers. So the designers, interior decorators, designers like beautiful objects, interesting things, and interior decorators also and for them, it's not something to read. It is something that they share with people and is on their,
Right. Yeah. They have to display these books. This is not a
yeah,
book they're putting on a shelf because of the spine. This is a
yeah.
displayed book. Right.
And so
So
that's
what,
been an
yeah,
interesting market to see.
when you only produce 250 copies, do most of the editions sell out for you?
Currently not right now. The deluxes always sell out very quickly. And most of the books, it takes us a couple years to sell out. We have a couple
Okay.
left, but a lot of our push is that it's a complicated thing I mean, we don't list on eBay and a bunch of other places. We don't list or I don't know even how you would sell certain ones of these books more aggressively. And so for
Right.
a lot of us, it is like our customer acquisition is always long-term thinking. It is we invest money in events, artist talks, publication parties, exhibit things where you're building a community that people come in, and then they might, after the third or fourth touch, or between 3 to 7 touches, if you're going to be technical, and use this, then they might decide to become a subscriber. And then there are
Right.
some folks where it's like there are certain book collectors who you like, oh, if you ever get David Rubenstein's attention, he will probably be interested in buy all. And every now and then you get a whale who comes in and just buys everything that's available. But a lot of times it's that level of building a community of people who want to support it as a cause and as a nonprofit and as
Right.
larger, and then they want to support the books. But yes, for sales for us, I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, launching all these different platforms, other ways to I mean, how do you go about trying to sell rare books?
I mean, it's going to sound a little simpler, but I have sold books for 5, 10, $20,000, and I have used eBay as that platform. Um, it doesn't happen every day, but it does happen annually to sell those types of books. And with eBay, the platform is global, so
Yeah. Well, maybe we should
you
list on
have a
eBay.
large pool to draw from. When I'm thinking of what you and I are talking about right now, and I think you mentioned briefly that libraries make up
Yeah.
10%. Um, are these libraries displaying the book, or are they going into the vault for the future?
A little of both. I mean, it's probably closer to 15% for libraries, but yeah, it is. There's some,
Right,
that's the other element that we have tried to do for audience growth, and we've
right,
had a lot of growth. But one key thing is that there's libraries who are collecting it, and they just goes into the vault where it's never
mhm,
touched or breathed.
right,
And then there's libraries where they actually want it to be used as part of their teaching curriculum or as part of their student, because artist books do show well to students because they're
yes,
interesting and interactive. And we've had a lot of audience growth. For us, it's like when I started, uh we had about 130-ish subscribers. It was about 100 men and about 30 women. And since then we've gotten 100 new subscribers in the last 3 years. And part of that was, and one of the key things was like a lot of these businesses, just the record keeping was very outdated and old fashioned. And it was like, oh, the person, are they quote unquote a subscriber, but they haven't bought the last three books and we don't know where they are. And one person, some of them turned out to be, uh, they had passed on, and there's all sorts of things where really building a community for us, it was like we did a big interactive exhibition in the Fog Art Fair, which is the big San
right,
Francisco annual art fair where we met a lot of folks. Then we started going around and doing talks. And so what we do for every one of our books is we have the artist um, do a big talk and launch here in San Francisco. And then we might go to other places where their work has been displayed. So Kentura Davis was Kentura Davis was an artist who had displayed work at National Portrait Gallery, so we were able to do a talk at the National Portrait Gallery. You do events at various other institutions, and you sort of try to build out kind of relevance and build out ways to kind of uh, you want chances for people to hear the story of the book,
sure,
especially people who don't read. Book collectors are, of course, deeply, they read written communication. They
mhm,
want to read huge amounts of writing about the book. A
right.
lot of other art collectors and others, they're very oral, or they want to hear like a little bit. And so it's like, how do you tell them that story in a way that they're going to hear? And someone who wouldn't normally be interested would say, "Oh, maybe I'll go for that."
Right. But I mean, have you guys ever thought of taking 15 or 20 volumes, different books,
Yeah.
and doing the New York Book Fair, and having a housing display and a salesman who can, the way
Yeah,
you
we
and I are
do.
talking, talk about the books?
We might go to print fairs. The thing about book fairs are that typically a lot of book fairs, the price tag is imposing for
Yes.
people. So for
Mhm.
art fairs, we have more luck because we're different and it's within the price range.
Right.
Sometimes antiquarian book fairs, we don't have that many, uh, the antiquarian audiences, there's a few people who are interested, but often the books are too lowbrow for them. It's
Right.
not rare enough. It's not exceptional, or
I
there.
would argue that. I mean, what you guys are creating is very rare. I mean,
It is,
the text itself isn't rare, but what you guys are creating from the text is very rare.
So I think that there's essentially, I found there were two options. There's one where it's sort of like arguing or sort of bludgeoning book collectors into caring, where it's like they already know everything about your book, and it's
Right.
like, and you're like, actually, you should care, and like, as enjoyable as that is, and I enjoy these sort of long literary conversations, or you go for saying, I'm going to be an evangelist. I'm
Mhm.
going to convert souls, convert new people. And that's where I found is that because the reality is there's not enough money in book collecting right now. There's an audience problem, in my view.
And so do do antiquarian, I want to say rare too, but antiquarian bookstores, would they ever buy a copy or subscribe to you to showcase those books in their store?
sometimes rare book collectors. There's a couple rare book dealers who do subscribe and
Okay,
support. I think the thing about the book dealers, of course, is that they they're looking for books that are going to increase in value and sell.
right.
So we have some who maybe they want a deluxe copy, and there's others who are, and so they tend to usually wait until one of our subscribers or collectors passes away, then they buy the collection and they
Uh,
sell the 25 best, which are worth a lot of money.
right,
And then, so that's typically, it's more of a it's more predators,
right.
which is fair. We're all playing the game.
Which is a rare book market. That is a
And
rare
so
book
a lot of
market.
times when I go to these rare book, some rare book dinner or something, it's like, it's all predators and no prey at the dinners. Who are the customers?
Yeah.
And so the thing that I've been very successful at is on the philanthropy side, beyond growing the subscribers. We started at about $300,000 a year in annual donations, and now we've grown to about 2.5 million in 4 years in annual donations. And Taylor's been incredibly important. He's joined our board and become the chair of our
Mhm.
board and incredibly philanthropic. And tapping into the philanthropy dollar market is huge and really transforms your thinking. And so it's no longer about trying to get these, I'm much trying to land individual sales or get it's much more about saying there is, especially in San Francisco, there is more money, by some estimates, there's more money in San Francisco and Silicon Valley than any area in human history, more wealth. And so, how do you convince more of that wealth to invest in the book and book arts and become book collectors, care about books? And so, a
Right.
lot of what we're doing is we're creating these um, uh, wonderful additions with top artists who you bring on site for people to meet. You host big events, glamorous events where you really create and a lot of special small salons where you have that kind of magical moment and interaction. And you try to say, and you capture someone's imagination. Oh, this is something fresh that it's not another museum that I'm donating to. I'm part of something small,
Right.
kind of an exclusive club kind of feel, but also something where they see like, oh, I am continuing this art form. I know the name of the person who's making my book or the seven
Mhm.
people because we have seven
Right.
full-time bookmakers.
Right.
And
But
that's the
also,
part that,
if you're a Robert Motherwell collector,
yeah,
you want to add, you definitely want to add this to your
yeah.
Motherwell collection. I mean, of course, like we talked about, you're never going to have it all, but you are going to have one of 250, which is
So
like, yeah,
that is
signed
the
lithograph.
other, you get to tap into these different markets. And I mean, I think that that's the part that's so interesting is I think a lot about the different roles a book can play in people's lives and how it creates meaning. For book collectors, it's one type of meaning, but then there's the type of person who's the interior designer. And, I'm an English major. So I, of course, think that reading books and having a deep understanding of, F. Scott Fitzgerald's, thinking and kind of philosophy and aesthetics behind this, but behind The Great Gatsby means that I have a deeper appreciation of that book. But the interior designer or decorator who just values it as an object, who am I to say that that's like a lower form of
Right.
appreciation? And
Mhm.
that's one of the things I've learned is to sort of put aside some of my, um, you know, Ivy League scruples and just try to say I'm trying to give people this sort of permission to enjoy books and find beauty and kind of have that place in their life
In whatever avenue they want to find it. Right.
whenever avenue it is,
Mhm.
and even if it's not reading books
Right.
necessarily.
Right. That's so interesting. So is there a book, since you're a literature major, is there a book, and you don't have to give anything away if anything's up and coming, but is there if there one or two books out there in your mind that you would love to see Arion to progress forward and
Well, sure.
produce something that is close to your heart and your soul?
Oh, well, thank you. That's a very kind question.
Yeah.
At this stage in my career, I'm much more interested in the books that, I try to be much dispassionate about it, where there's the things that I love, but the question is, does that make sense for Arion at this moment,
Right.
building audiences, new audiences? And
Mhm.
we've had a lot of growth, especially among women and people of color and our subscribers. We've had big leaps and growths. And that's an interesting thing to see. How do you continue to grow that? And so there's certain things. Sure, I love Joan Didion, I love Flannery O'Connor. I would love to see, or I love Evelyn Waugh, but Ernest Hemingway, many people, Dostoevsky,
Right.
Bulgakov, but they are not. the question is always, what works for the press and is going to make a beautiful book. And I'm sure I will fall in love with the books. And a lot
Mhm.
of times there's things like I didn't particularly like, I had not read Aesop's Fables since I was, a
Sure.
kid. And now
Yeah.
it's like revisiting that and spending time with it. It's like how fascinating. It's like the
Right.
second most reprinted book in the English language other than the Bible. And there's all sorts of it was every printer. It is
Right.
who there's this whole history of printing around it that I didn't, the morals didn't really come in till the, 19th century.
Right.
So there's all sorts of things like that where uh, that curiosity of being open to having things expand and grow is, I think, really important for the job and the other thing. And I do know that like a lot of, so I try to expand out my scope while a lot of other book people try to shrink and sort of focus their scope to be more narrow and achievable. And for me,
Right.
I try to maintain a sort of that, it's an interesting I don't know, question, but I appreciate it. It's very kind.
Yeah. Only because, you're a literature major and I know you have your favorite, you probably have your top 10
Were
favorite list.
were you an English major?
I went to college in the place you went to college at, in Massachusetts.
Ah,
Uh-huh. And I was a literature major as
who
well.
did you
And
study with?
what's that?
Who was your favorite professor?
Oh, wow. My favorite professor was a man named Ronald Lettieri.
Hmm.
He changed my world. I walked into a class of his called Brave New World as a freshman. And from the 3 minutes into that lecture, that professor changed my life. And I took a class with him every semester, every year until I graduated. So the power of the professor was very,
Yeah, Helen Bendler, who actually is a poetry professor, and she wrote some introductions for Arion a previous time. I took her class in freshman year, and it was like her freshman seminar. It was on Herbert and George Herbert and Gerard Manley Hopkins, but it was very much like after about 10 minutes of freshman discussion, she's like, "You have no idea how to read poetry," and she just paused, and she went off on this brilliant and wonderful sort of monologue, this sort of speech
Mhm.
that I still have the notes from somewhere about like, here are the 5 different things that you need to look for when you're reading poetry. And it was very much about this is what it means to be a serious reader. And this is how you truly read something at the highest and most deep and deepest level.
Yeah, I remember Professor Lettieri one November evening gave me a printout copy of Bertrand Russell's um, little essay, What I Have Lived For.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever read that. It's like a 3 or 4 paragraph essay that's in the beginning of his autobiography. And I remember him giving me a copy of that. And man, that has stayed with me since that moment in my life. So yeah, it's an amazing. You already know this. It's an amazing opportunity to go to college in Massachusetts or in
Yeah.
New England. There's nothing else like it in the world.
Oh, and that is the question. I mean, one of the larger questions of book selling to me, the macro question is, what do you do to make a living as an English major? Like, what is the skill set? So,
Right.
do we all have to be coders in college? Like, or is there by just economic necessity
Right.
in the new? And I believe that there are these other types of skills about learning to read and learning how to observe and process all of the language and writing that comes at you and learning to write. And in a way, is that so much of being able to actually form your thoughts and to have a sort of coherent way to adapt and express to the world around you that is like incredibly just invaluable, but there aren't the sort of it doesn't always have the same set career paths as like a
Right.
certain other where the application is totally clear for certain science or math
Hmm.
kind of disciplines. And that's one of the things that's interesting to me is because I think if you can find your own light, and one of the things that's nice, I feel like at this my job at Arion is I've found a bit of independence out as well. There isn't a book to read on the 10 best things to do if you're selling $1,000 fine press books or doing
Right.
it and being alive, fully alive, and like trying to pay attention, how do people find meaning in books? How do you adjust and adapt the way you talk about it, the strategies for how you design the books and all these things to have success is like it feels fully, I feel fully alive and fully engaged. And that's just a lucky and privileged and honored place to be.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people who are going to listen to us and watch us are going to be very envious of your job every day. to be able to handle these books and talk about them and just talk about them. Never mind selling them.
Yeah.
What are you guys into 2025 already? Where is the press
Sure.
at now?
So yeah,
What
next
they're
year,
looking
the
at?
sort of the preview for next year is that we're going to do 3 books for next year. That these are tentative; they may change, but
Mhm.
currently, the first book will be the Epic of Gilgamesh with
Okay.
artwork by Barry Moser, and Barry Moser is the incredible book
Right.
illustrator.
Going back to the beginning, yeah.
So yeah, he has
Yeah.
not done a book with Arion since Moby Dick back in the 70s. So it's his
Okay.
first return in 45 years. So that's the first work of recorded literature, and that will also have a book introduction by Nicholas Basbanes, the great historian and author of book collecting and
Mhm.
bibliophilic culture. The second book
A
will
gentle
probably,
madness.
oh yeah, it's indeed.
His name, his name comes up on almost every episode that I do on Destination Unknown.
Nick's
Yeah.
a great friend,
Yeah.
and
Sooner or later, sooner or later I'm gonna get to him.
maybe I'll. There's Nick. Then the next is we're looking at Mrs. Dalloway, the
Okay.
Virginia Woolf classic. It's a centennial, and we're working with an incredible artist named Claire Rojas, who's one of the great living California artists, to do that. And the third book will be we will be doing an edition of Isaac Asimov's Nightfall, which is voted as the some voted by the Science Fiction Writers of America as the greatest science fiction story ever written, sort of a novella, and that with a wonderful artist named Ala Ebtekar, who does these series of moon sort of lunar prints, photographic prints, and the novella is about a planet that has 6 suns and has never had a day, hasn't had a nightfall and seen the stars in in centuries. And then this is a day where there's a full eclipse, and then night falls, and then society goes into tumult. And there's an upcoming eclipse in March, and so he's doing a series of photographic prints that are going to be developed under the starlight of that eclipse. And so in our books, that's the one that's going to be the experimental one. And but we're really thrilled.
Yeah, and we should
That
add though, this is tentative. This is not set in
Yeah,
stone.
it may change, but I would say that we're 90% certain those are going to be the 3, and you can check back in early January on the Arion Press website to
We
see the
may just
book.
come back. We just may come back for another interview when
Please.
that when that happens. Well, we're coming upon our hour now. I
Great.
thank you so much for your time. I think my dreams are going to be very colorful tonight, thinking about all
Good.
this, all of the beautiful books you guys are creating over there. It's just amazing to me. Um, as always, the last question of Destination Unknown, your episode 21. Where will you be sending me off to episode 22?
Do you want to talk to Nick Bassbanes?
If you want to make it
Sure.
happen, it would be an honor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's then do Nick Bassbanes.
Yeah.
I'll introduce you to him.
I love that. Thank you very much. And we will have this edited down and we'll be on our YouTube channel in a week or so. I will send you a link
Great.
and everything else. Just please pay attention to some of the comments because people will ask some questions.
Oh,
And I
sure.
have a feeling they're going to ask a lot of questions about what you guys are doing. And
Great.
it's such a wonderful, beautiful thing. And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. And I'll send you an email or a link that you can include to the Arion website. But yeah, I will read the
Yes,
comments and respond. So
I
thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you, Ted.
Bye.